Corey, you ready for a conversational RPG?
In the great city, at the end of the world, there's a dead body behind the hostile cafeteria. And a strike that's about to become a war.
Corey, you and I jumped into Disco Elysium, the final cut. Dude, I was pumped for this game. It is a spin on a point-and-click adventure game with an RPG twist, right? There is, you and I touched about this just before doing the review, the fact that there is no combat. It's all like conversational based. It's very artistic, it's very stylized, and I appreciate what it is, but dude, every time I turn this game on, I instantly fell asleep.
You know what? I can hear you. This game was originally released on PC in 2019, and it won a ton of awards when it comes to the story it laid out, the way the conversations, and how deep this game really is. Because this game is deep. The campaign's about 20 hours long, and you can get really immersed in this story. But the problem is you need to actually have a pretty high reading level here, because there's a lot of conversational text to go through, and that's the biggest portion of this game, like you said. So the story kind of starts off as, you know, we're trying to cure our amnesia, but we find out we're a detective and we're trying to solve a murder, and essentially the entire thing is based around finding clues. You know, you're rolling around and you're trying to figure out exactly what's going on, who you are, and what your part in this story all is. And
dude, that's so cool.
It's a great story, and I think the idea behind this game is amazing. But the problem is you really need to get hooked with this story and these characters early on, because there isn't a ton of action here. The pace of the game is fairly slow. Yes, you can run a little bit, but there's a lot of slow walking. The nice thing about Final Cut was that they actually brought the aspect of having every character in this game actually have voiceover audio, not just a couple lines like the original game was. And we're also getting it on console, which is kind of my next point. I played on keyboard and mouse mostly. I tried controller. I didn't like it as much. I know you stuck with controller and you had a few issues.
Dude, I played on Google Stadia, right? So I'm like, cool, I can play this wherever I want. This is awesome. It's a story heavy base focus. Let's get into it. The controls on this game are god awful. They're horrendous. I'm trying to figure out, because on a point and click on mouse and keyboard, normally it's super simple, right? You hover over an object, you click, you're good to go. This, I'm moving my right analog stick to highlight the objects I need to encounter with. Problem is, half the time I'm bouncing over to that object or that object, and I want to get to this one instead, right? And I can't pinpoint where I want. They should have went with that cursor feel in this game on the controller, and that would have made life a heck of a lot easier. You can hold the L1 button, and it'll prompt you as to what objects can be highlighted or used. Perfect. Dude, from there, all I need to do then was scroll over with my right analog stick. I couldn't do that. I'm bouncing all the way around everything except for what I want to actually interact with. And it was so cumbersome and frustrating. And then besides that, dude, I appreciate the voiceover and the dialogue, right? You can really, like you said, Corey, you can really get immersed into this game. Yeah. There's a lot going on. I think the narrator himself is fantastic.
A mirror hangs above a bent and broken sink. In a fierce discharge of masculine energy, someone has ripped half the faucet off. Suddenly, you realize you have no memory of the face that awaits you there.
But the rest of it from there on out, it's just, man, I couldn't help but fall asleep. I was so disappointed because I saw the amount of awards the game won, and I saw the hype behind it, and I wonder if it was one of those things that it was just overhyped to me, right? So going in, I have huge expectations. I'm a big fan of the genre as a whole, and I get in there and you pick like your specialty, and I was just like, what are, like, the art direction? I love stylized games. Dude, this one for me was just a little too much stylization in this thing. It's got this oil-esque paint style. I thought, okay, that's cool. I can appreciate what it is. I'm definitely harder towards the like cell shaded, you know, Breath of the Wild-esque kind of feel, that sort of, or get into like a hardcore realism. But when it came to this one, the painting style itself I thought was unique. I can appreciate it, but man, I had the hardest time in the world, Corey, getting into this game.
Yeah, like you said, I started on controller as well, and I found it very difficult. The one thing, if I could ask them to improve, is if you're going to play this on controller, just have it be, like you said, either cursor-based or just, you know, area radius around your character. Because when you're trying to press X or you're moving the right stick, you have to highlight everything on screen, and you might not be even near or even being able to access a couple of those things. Just let me highlight what's close to me. You know, if it's 3-4 things, no big deal. But everything on the screen, it was just, that's why I switched over to mouse and keyboard. I was like, all right, well, let's give this a try. It was better, but even then, the controls still felt, you know, kind of clunky. And it's just the pacing of this game. It's the way this game's laid out. You have to get used to that and be okay with it. Maybe it's just we come from a background of games that are just a little bit of a faster pace, higher action. So I can appreciate where this game's coming from, the dark story that it tells, the way you can get involved in these conversations. But I did mention earlier that all the characters have voiceover lines and everything now, but unfortunately I did run into a lot of times where they either got cut off, it was never even announced, like that you don't hear them all. Like they say every character's got them, and they do, but there were issues with them not always happening, right? You just get the text, you wouldn't get the voiceover as well. So that was a little bit of a hindrance too, because I encountered this early on in the story, so I was, you know, I wasn't as immersed as I would like, because the voiceovers were done well. I thought, like you said, the main narration was amazing. That guy's a popular jazz artist, actually, so that he's got that voice, and you can tell, right? So it's
very cool.
It's one of these things where it's just, it's nice to hear, and it allows you to get into these games, but I had a tough time, man. This one was slow.
Absolutely.
It's got a story, but it's going to take some time to get into it, and unfortunately I don't think everybody's going to want to invest that time.
Not at all.
Abort. You clearly have not thought this through. You won't like what you see there, and you will never unbecome it.
Corey, I think I woke up, so I'm ready to review this one. Let's give it a score. For me, I'm jumping in because, like I said, it was so hard, dude. I fell asleep through every time I turned the game on. You know, we play a lot of games, and when you get to the game that's so hyped like this, I'm looking forward to it. It was so disappointing to just fall asleep, and you turn it on, man, I gotta... You know what I mean? And I didn't want that going into this game, and I tried to push through it. It was one of the most difficult games I think I played this year, just because of how slow-paced it was, and I'm putting it at a 4.
You know what? I'm a little bit higher than you. I can appreciate what this game was trying to deliver. I think fans of the original game are really going to like the final cut. They're going to like some of the things added in. But even then, there's no change to the story here. So if you've played it once, you've played it once. You've had it, you played it all the times you can play it. So there's not a ton of replayability here. I think it's a real 50-50 split crowd on this one. I got to give it a 5.5.
It's been a whole week already.
Behind the laugh, however, a touch of sorrow.
A deep dialogue-driven RPG with well-done voiceovers and lots of characters to interact with, but the slow pace and long conversations may have you tapping out early.
You prove them wrong, or lose your mind. Disco Elysium, the final cut.